Jessica Morgan was exhausted but excited as she made her way through the busy airport terminal. After working countless hours on the Henderson project for months, she had finally landed the deal that would likely earn her a promotion at the marketing firm where she'd been working for the past 5 years. The business meeting in Chicago tomorrow would seal everything, and for once, she had decided to treat herself to a first-class ticket instead of her usual economy seat. As she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, she received a warm smile. "Enjoy your flight in first class, Ms. Morgan," the agent said. Jessica nodded appreciatively and walked down the jet bridge. She had saved up her miles and a portion of her bonus specifically for this upgrade. After all the late nights and working weekends, she deserved this small luxury. Upon entering the plane, a flight attendant with a name tag reading Patricia greeted passengers with a practiced smile. "Welcome aboard," Patricia said to the businessman in front of Jessica, directing him to his seat with a gesture. When Jessica stepped forward, Patricia's smile seemed to freeze slightly. "Your boarding pass?" she asked, despite having not asked the previous passengers for theirs. Jessica handed it over without comment. "Hey, down to your right," Patricia said curtly, already looking past Jessica to the next passenger. Jessica made her way to her spacious first-class seat, stowed her carry-on in the overhead bin, and settled in. The leather seat was comfortable and roomy, such a nice change from being cramped in economy. She took out her phone to send a quick text to her mother, letting her know she had boarded safely. Around her, other first-class passengers were getting comfortable. An older gentleman across the aisle was already leafing through a magazine. A middle-aged couple was discussing dinner plans for Chicago. 2 rows ahead, a woman about Jessica's age was applying lip gloss using a small mirror. About 15 minutes before takeoff, a different flight attendant, a man whose name tag read Kyle, had emerged from the galley pushing a cart. He began offering glasses of champagne to first-class passengers, a standard pre-flight perk that Jessica had been looking forward to. "Champagne, sir?" Kyle asked the businessman in 11C, who accepted with a nod. "Champagne?" he offered to the couple in 12A and B, who both took a glass. Jessica set her phone down and prepared for her turn. But as Kyle approached her row, something strange happened. He simply pushed his cart past her seat without even making eye contact, continuing on to 14A. "Champagne, sir?" he asked the older gentleman behind Jessica. Jessica was confused. Maybe he had missed her somehow? She raised her hand slightly. "Excuse me?" Kyle turned, his expression neutral. "Yes? Could I have some champagne as well, please?" Jessica asked politely. Kyle's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm sorry. We've run out." Jessica glanced back at his cart, where she could clearly see at least 4 more filled champagne flutes. She was about to point this out when Kyle quickly moved on to the next row, offering champagne to another passenger who gladly accepted. The obvious lie stunned Jessica into momentary silence. She watched as Kyle continued serving other passengers in first class, the champagne supply mysteriously replenished for everyone except her. A sudden feeling of heat rose to Jessica's face as the reality of the situation dawned on her. She was the only black passenger in the first-class cabin, and apparently the only one deemed unworthy of the standard service. The businessman across from her caught her eye briefly before quickly looking away, obviously having noticed what happened. The awkward moment confirmed that she hadn't imagined it. Jessica took a deep breath. Throughout her career, she had encountered subtle biases before, being mistaken for administrative staff instead of an executive, having her ideas overlooked, until repeated by someone else being asked if she was in the right meeting when joining senior leadership discussions. She had learned to pick her battles carefully, to remain professional even when seething inside. The plane was nearly ready for departure when Jessica noticed another passenger board late, a white man in an expensive-looking suit who seemed slightly out of breath from rushing. He took his seat in 15B, directly behind the older gentleman. Patricia appeared quickly to help him stow his luggage, and within minutes, Kyle approached him with, to Jessica's disbelief, a glass of the supposedly out champagne. Pre-flight. "Champagne, sir?" Kyle offered with a smile that had been nowhere in evidence when addressing Jessica. "Thank you. the late-arriving businessman said, accepting the glass. Jessica felt her hands tighten around her phone. The disrespect was so blatant it was almost hard to believe. She had paid the same premium fare as everyone else in the cabin. She belonged in first class just as much as any other passenger. She pulled up the Notes app on her phone and carefully documented what had happened, including the time, the flight number, and the names of the flight attendants involved. As she typed, she noticed the woman a few rows ahead watching her with a sympathetic expression. Their eyes met briefly, and the woman gave her a small nod as if to say, "I saw what happened too." Jessica finished recording the details and then opened the airline's app on her phone. She navigated to the customer service section, considering whether to submit a complaint right away or wait until after the flight. The thought of spending the next 3 hours being served by people who had already shown such disregard for her was unappealing at best. As the safety demonstration began, Jessica made her decision. She wasn't going to cause a scene. That would only play into harmful stereotypes. But she wasn't going to quietly accept this treatment either. Once the demonstration finished and before the plane started taxiing, she pressed the call button above her seat. Patricia appeared with a tight smile. "Yes? I'd like to speak with the lead flight attendant, please," Jessica said calmly. Patricia's smile faltered. "I'll see if she's available. We're preparing for takeoff." "I understand," Jessica replied, her voice level but firm. "I'll wait." As Patricia walked away, Jessica noticed several passengers watching the interaction. The couple across the aisle quickly averted their eyes when she glanced their way. The older gentleman behind her was pretending to be deeply engrossed in the safety card. Jessica didn't care. She had worked too hard, come too far, and paid too much to be treated as if she didn't belong. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. This was not going to be the end of the story. Jessica sat waiting for the lead flight attendant, her heart beating a little faster than normal. She wasn't someone who typically made complaints, preferring to let small issues slide. But this wasn't small. This was about dignity and respect. A few minutes passed before a woman with silver-streaked hair and a name tag reading Helen approached her seat. "I understand you wanted to speak with me?" Helen asked, her tone professional but slightly rushed. "Yes," Jessica replied quietly, conscious of nearby passengers who might overhear. "I was skipped during the pre-flight champagne service, and when I asked for a glass, I was told it had run out. But I've watched as every other passenger in first class has been served, including someone who boarded after me." Helen's expression remained neutral. "I'm sure there must be some misunderstanding. Perhaps Kyle didn't see you. Or maybe you were looking at your phone?" Jessica felt a flash of irritation at the immediate attempt to dismiss her experience. "I wasn't on my phone when he came by with a cart. He looked directly at me before moving to the next row. And when I called him back to ask for champagne, he claimed there wasn't any left, even though I could see several glasses on his cart. He's continued serving other passengers since then." Helen glanced around the cabin, seeming uncomfortable. "Well, sometimes we reserve certain glasses for passengers with special dietary needs." "I don't believe anyone asked me about dietary needs," Jessica interrupted, keeping her voice steady despite her growing frustration. "And the passenger who boarded late was immediately offered champagne without any questions about dietary restrictions." The plane began to taxi, and Helen gripped the back of the seat. "I'll need to return to my station for takeoff. I'll look into this once we're at cruising altitude." "Before you go," Jessica said, "could I get your full name and the names of the other flight attendants working in first class today? I'd like to include that information when I contact customer service." Helen's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something between surprise and worry. "That won't be necessary. I'll personally make sure you're well taken care of for the remainder of the flight." "I appreciate that," Jessica replied firmly. "But I'd still like the information." After a brief hesitation, Helen provided the requested names. As she walked away, Jessica noticed the woman a few rows ahead giving her a subtle thumbs-up of encouragement. Jessica looked out the window as the plane accelerated down the runway. Outside, the airport buildings blurred into streaks as they gained speed. She thought about how many times in her life she had brushed off similar experiences, telling herself they weren't worth the emotional energy. But each time she stayed silent, something inside her dimmed a little. Not today, she decided. Once they reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign switched off, Jessica connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi. The airline's app showed she had a strong connection, allowing her to access her email. She begged, and composing a detailed message to the customer service department, describing exactly what had happened. As she typed, she realized the woman who had given her the thumbs up was now standing in the aisle, apparently on her way to the restroom. She paused by Jessica's seat. "I saw what happened," the woman whispered. "It was completely inappropriate. If you need a witness, I'm in 10B. My name's Tanya." "Thank you," Jessica whispered back, genuinely touched by the gesture. After Tanya returned to her seat, Jessica finished her email, attaching her frequent flyer information to establish her history as a loyal customer. As she was about to hit send, she hesitated. The airline's customer service department received thousands of complaints daily. How long would it take for someone to actually read her message? How many layers of representatives would it filter through before reaching someone with the authority to take meaningful action? Jessica scrolled through her contacts until she found her cousin Denise's number. Denise had been working in the corporate office of this very airline for nearly a decade, handling public relations and crisis management. They weren't particularly close, but they kept in touch at family gatherings and occasionally texted about travel tips. Knowing the plane would begin its descent into Chicago in about 2 hours, Jessica decided to make a quick call. She put in her earbuds and dialed. Denise answered on the third ring. "Jessica, this is a surprise. Aren't you usually working at this hour?" "I am working, sort of," Jessica explained. "I'm actually on one of your company's flights right now, heading to Chicago for a meeting." "Oh, nice. Business or pleasure?" "Business, but I upgraded to first class as a treat. Unfortunately, it hasn't been very pleasant so far." Jessica briefly explained what had happened. There was a pause on the line before Denise responded, her voice notably different, more professional, less casual. "That is absolutely unacceptable. Which flight are you on?" Jessica provided the flight number and the names she'd collected. "Give me a moment," Denise said. Jessica could hear keyboard clicking in the background. "I see your flight in the system. I'm going to connect you directly with Robert Chen. He's the VP of Customer Experience, and he needs to hear this firsthand." Before Jessica could respond, the line went silent for a few seconds, then a deep voice came through. "This is Robert Chen. Am I speaking with Jessica Morgan?" Surprised by the quick escalation, Jessica straightened in her seat. "Yes, that's me." "Ms. Morgan, I understand from Denise that you've experienced discriminatory treatment on one of our flights. First, let me apologize that this has happened. Could you walk me through exactly what occurred?" Jessica recounted the incident in detail, keeping her tone factual and professional despite the emotions still bubbling beneath the surface. As she spoke, she noticed Kyle glancing nervously in her direction from the galley area, clearly aware that something was happening. "Do you have any documentation of the incident?" Robert asked when she finished. "I have detailed notes I took immediately after it happened, and another passenger offered to verify my account. She witnessed the whole thing." "That's very helpful," Robert said, his voice grave. "I want you to know we take these matters extremely seriously. Our airline has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. I'm initiating an investigation immediately, and I'll be reviewing the cabin footage myself." Jessica hadn't even considered that there might be security cameras in the cabin. The thought that there could be visual evidence brought both relief and validation. "What happens now?" she asked. "For the immediate term, I'll be contacting the flight crew's supervisor. They won't be informed during the flight to avoid any potential confrontation, but action will be taken immediately upon landing. I'd like to call you once you've arrived in Chicago to follow up, if that's acceptable." "Yes, that would be fine," Jessica agreed. After ending the call, Jessica noticed the cabin atmosphere had subtly changed. Patricia and Kyle were now avoiding the first-class cabin entirely, with only Helen occasionally passing through to provide necessary service. No one had offered Jessica anything since boarding. No beverage service, no mention of the meal that other passengers were now receiving. The older gentleman across the aisle leaned slightly toward her. "Trouble with the service?" he asked quietly. Jessica nodded but didn't elaborate. "I noticed what happened earlier," he continued. "Been flying first class for 30 years, never seen anything like it. You did right to speak up." His simple acknowledgement meant more than he probably realized. Jessica thanked him with a small smile. As the flight continued, Jessica observed the crew's behavior changing. Helen was now visibly nervous, checking her phone whenever she thought no one was looking. Patricia had disappeared entirely from the first-class cabin. Only Kyle continued working, though he now studiously avoided eye contact with Jessica. Jessica wondered what was happening behind the scenes. Had Robert already contacted someone? Were messages being exchanged about the situation, even as the plane made its way toward Chicago? One thing was certain. Her quiet stand against disrespect had set something significant in motion. As the captain announced they would begin their descent in 20 minutes, Jessica felt a mixture of emotions: lingering anger at how she'd been treated, satisfaction that she hadn't let it slide, and curiosity about what would happen when they landed. Whatever came next, she had refused to be invisible, and that, she realized, was already a victory in itself. The flight began its descent into Chicago, and Jessica stared out the window at the sprawling city below. The afternoon sun glinted off Lake Michigan, creating a dazzling display of light that would normally have captivated her attention. Today, however, her mind was elsewhere. For the remainder of the flight, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin had been strained. Helen had eventually brought Jessica a glass of water, the only service she'd received since boarding, with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. The other flight attendants seemed to have found reasons to stay in other sections of the plane. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our final approach into Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The local time is 2:37 p.m., and the temperature is a pleasant 72 degrees. Please make sure your seatbelts are fastened, your tray tables are stowed, and your seats are in the upright position." Jessica put her phone in airplane mode and made sure her belongings were secured. Across the aisle, the older gentleman who had spoken to her earlier caught her eye and gave her a respectful nod. She returned it with a small smile, grateful for that simple human connection. As the plane descended through clouds, Jessica thought about her meeting tomorrow. She had been so looking forward to this trip, to presenting the marketing campaign she'd worked on for months. The Henderson account was the biggest her firm had ever handled, and landing it had been a personal triumph. She had planned to arrive, check into her hotel, review her presentation once more, and then treat herself to a nice dinner at that Italian place her colleague had recommended. Now, she felt drained by the emotional toll of the last few hours. The excitement of traveling first class had been thoroughly spoiled. The plane touched down with a gentle bump and began taxiing toward the terminal. Jessica noticed that Helen was now standing near the cockpit door, speaking into a phone with a concerned expression. As the plane approached the gate, Helen quickly ended her call and stuffed the phone into her pocket, her face noticeably pale. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Local time is 2:43 p.m. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign." As the standard arrival announcement continued, Jessica noticed something unusual happening at the jet bridge. Through the small windows, she could see several people in airline uniforms waiting. This wasn't the normal ground crew. They were dressed more formally, and their expressions were serious. The plane came to a complete stop, and the seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers immediately began standing, retrieving items from overhead, bins, and forming the usual impatient queue in the aisle. Jessica remained seated, in no rush to join the crush of people. The cabin door opened, but instead of passengers beginning to deplane, one of the waiting airline officials stepped aboard. He spoke briefly to Helen, whose face now showed clear distress. She nodded stiffly and moved aside. The official, a tall man in a crisp uniform with a badge that read Regional Operations Manager, stepped to the front of the first-class cabin and spoke in a quiet but firm voice to Kyle and Patricia, who had reappeared from wherever they'd been hiding. Jessica couldn't hear what was being said, but the body language told her everything. Kyle's shoulders slumped in defeat, while Patricia began speaking rapidly, her hands making defensive gestures. The manager shook his head, clearly not interested in explanations. Another airline employee, a woman in a similar uniform, approached Jessica's seat. "Ms. Morgan?" she asked quietly. Jessica nodded, surprised to be addressed by name. "I'm Vanessa Thompson, Customer Relations Director. Mr. Chen asked me to meet your flight. Would you mind remaining on board briefly after other passengers have deplaned? We'd like to speak with you privately." "Of course," Jessica agreed, her curiosity piqued. Vanessa nodded and moved back toward the front of the plane. By now, passengers had begun filing out, many glancing curiously at the officials and the visibly upset flight attendants. Tanya, the woman who had offered to be a witness, paused by Jessica's seat on her way out. "Everything okay?" she whispered. "I think so," Jessica replied. "Thank you again for offering to help." "No problem. What happened to you wasn't right." Tanya slipped a business card into Jessica's hand. "If you need a statement from me, just call." After all other passengers had deplaned, only Jessica, the flight officials, and the 3 first-class flight attendants remained in the cabin. The regional operations manager approached Jessica. "Ms. Morgan, I'm David Winters. On behalf of the airline, I want to personally apologize for your experience today. We've received a direct communication from our VP of Customer Experience regarding your treatment on this flight, and we're taking immediate action." Jessica appreciated his straightforward approach. "Thank you for responding so quickly. Would you be willing to provide a statement about what occurred? We already have your initial report, but any additional details would be helpful." Jessica nodded and recounted the incident once more. Aware of Kyle and Patricia standing uncomfortably near the galley, Helen slightly apart from them with her arms crossed defensively. David listened carefully, occasionally making notes on a tablet. When Jessica finished, he thanked her and turned to the flight attendants. "Based on Ms. Morgan's report, the witness statement we've already obtained from another passenger, and the preliminary review of cabin footage, all 3 of you are being removed from service effective immediately, pending a full investigation." Patricia gasped. "You can't be serious? Over a misunderstanding about champagne?" David's expression hardened. "This is not about champagne, Ms. Lawson. This is about discriminatory service and lying to a passenger. We have clear evidence that Ms. Morgan was deliberately skipped during service, lied to when she requested champagne, and then subjected to continued differential treatment for the remainder of the flight." Kyle attempted to interject, but David cut him off. "The cabin footage clearly shows you serving champagne to a passenger who boarded after Ms. Morgan, directly contradicting your claim that you had run out. There's no misunderstanding here, only misconduct." Helen, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "I wasn't involved in the initial incident. I only became aware of it after—" "You were made aware of a serious complaint and chose to dismiss it," David interrupted. "As lead flight attendant, you had a responsibility to address the situation properly. Instead, you attempted to minimize it and discourage Ms. Morgan from filing a formal complaint." The 3 flight attendants were instructed to collect their personal belongings and report to the administration office. As they filed out, none of them looked at Jessica. Once they were gone, Vanessa approached with a sympathetic smile. "Ms. Morgan, we've arranged for a representative to assist you with your luggage and escort you to a private lounge where you can wait comfortably. Mr. Chen would like to speak with you personally." Jessica followed Vanessa off the plane, where a young man was waiting to help with her carry-on. As they walked through the terminal, Jessica noticed people glancing at their small procession with curiosity. In a quiet corner of the airport was a door marked Premium Lounge, Invitation Only. Vanessa led her inside, where plush seating, refreshments, and a peaceful atmosphere awaited. A few business travelers looked up briefly as they entered, then returned to their laptops and phones. "Please make yourself comfortable," Vanessa said, gesturing to a private alcove with comfortable chairs. "Mr. Chen will be calling shortly. In the meantime, can we get you anything? A proper glass of champagne, perhaps?" The gentle irony in Vanessa's voice made Jessica smile for the first time since boarding the plane. Actually, that would be nice. Thank you. Left alone with a flute of excellent champagne, Jessica took a moment to process everything that had happened. What had started as an unpleasant incident had escalated into something much larger. She had expected to file a complaint that might result in a form letter apology. Instead, 3 people had been removed from their positions within hours. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Robert Chen, as promised. Jessica took a deep breath and answered. Ms. Morgan, thank you for taking my call. I understand you've been taken care of by our team in Chicago? Yes, everyone has been very helpful, Jessica confirmed. Good. I've reviewed the initial report and spoken with Mr. Winters. I want you to know that this type of behavior is absolutely counter to our values as a company. The employees involved have been suspended pending formal termination proceedings, which will be completed by tomorrow. Jessica hadn't expected such swift and definitive action. That seems very fast. In cases of clear discrimination, we don't equivocate or delay, Robert explained. The evidence is unambiguous. We've also identified a pattern of similar complaints against these individuals that had not previously been connected. There was a pause before Robert continued, his tone becoming more personal. Ms. Morgan, I also want to apologize that you had to experience this at all. No passenger should ever be made to feel unwelcome or less than, especially not due to race or any other characteristic. The simple acknowledgement, the fact that he had directly named what had happened rather than dancing around it, meant a great deal to Jessica. I appreciate that, she said quietly. We'd like to offer you a complete refund of your ticket, a complimentary upgrade to first class for your return flight, and additional flight credits for future travel. It's a small gesture compared to the discomfort you experienced. After finalizing these details, Robert asked if there was anything else the airline could do. Jessica thought for a moment. Actually, yes. I think this incident could be a valuable training opportunity for your staff. Maybe something positive could come from it. Robert seemed genuinely interested in her suggestion. I couldn't agree more. Would you be willing to consult with our training department on developing a case study? We'd compensate you for your time, of course. As the call ended, Jessica sat back in her comfortable chair, taking a sip of champagne. Today hadn't gone as planned. What should have been a simple, pleasant flight had turned into something much more complicated and draining. Yet, she couldn't help feeling that her decision to speak up had mattered, not just for her but potentially for many other passengers who might have faced similar treatment in silence. Outside the lounge windows, planes took off and landed against the backdrop of the Chicago skyline. Jessica had stood her ground, and in doing so, perhaps changed a small corner of the world for the better. Jessica sat in the quiet luxury of the private lounge, finishing her champagne as she gathered her thoughts. The gentle hum of conversation and the occasional announcement over the airport's PA system created a soothing background noise that helped calm her still racing mind. A soft ping from her phone drew her attention. It was a text from her boss, Diane. Landed yet? How was the flight? Jessica stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How could she possibly summarize everything that had just happened in a text? After a moment's consideration, she simply wrote back, landed safely. Flight was eventful. I'll call you later from the hotel. She slipped her phone back into her purse and checked the time. It was nearly 3:30 p.m., and she had planned to be at her hotel by now, reviewing her presentation, materials for tomorrow's meeting. The Henderson account was too important to let anything distract her, even this unexpected drama. Vanessa returned, knocking gently on the wall of Jessica's alcove before entering. Ms. Morgan, your luggage has been prioritized and should be available. Now, we have a car waiting to take you to your hotel whenever you're ready. Thank you, that's very kind, Jessica replied, genuinely appreciative of how the airline was handling the aftermath. Not at all. It's the least we can do. Vanessa hesitated, then added in a more personal tone, for what it's worth, I've worked for this airline for 15 years. Most of our staff would be horrified by how you were treated. I'm truly sorry it happened. The sincerity in Vanessa's voice touched Jessica. I believe you. I've flown with your airline many times without incident. That's partly why today was so surprising. Vanessa nodded. Unfortunately, it only takes a few individuals to create a terrible experience. But I'm glad you spoke up. Changes only happen when brave people point out problems. Jessica hadn't thought of herself as brave. She'd simply refused to accept disrespect. But perhaps in today's world, that itself required a certain courage. A young man in a uniform appeared at the entrance to the alcove. "Ms. Morgan, your car is ready whenever you are." 20 minutes later, Jessica was sitting in the back seat of a sleek black car as it navigated through Chicago's afternoon traffic. The driver, a friendly middle-aged man named Hector, had been briefed only that she was a VIP customer requiring special attention. "First time in Chicago?" he asked, making conversation as they waited at a red light. "No, I've been here several times for work," Jessica replied. "But I never seem to have enough time to actually see the city properly." "That's how it goes with business travel." Hector nodded sympathetically. "Always rushing from the airport to meetings and back again. If you ever do get some free time, though, the Architecture River cruise is worth every penny." The simple, normal conversation was refreshing after the high intensity of the past few hours. As they drove along Lakeshore Drive with the vast blue expanse of Lake Michigan on one side and the impressive Chicago skyline on the other, Jessica felt herself beginning to relax. Her phone rang. Diane, again. This time Jessica answered. "Hey, I just got a very strange call," Diane said without preamble. "Someone named Robert Chen from the airline. He said there was an incident on your flight and wanted to assure me that it wouldn't impact your ability to make tomorrow's presentation." "What happened?" Jessica sighed. Of course, Robert would have called her firm. He had mentioned something about making sure her business trip wasn't negatively impacted, but she hadn't expected him to contact her boss directly. "It's a long story," Jessica began. "The short version is that I experienced some discriminatory treatment on the flight, reported it, and the airline took immediate action." "Discriminatory?" Diane's voice sharpened. "Because you're black?" "It appears so. They've suspended the flight attendants involved." There was a pause before Diane responded. "Are you okay? Do you need anything? We can postpone tomorrow's meeting if—" "No," Jessica interrupted firmly. "I'm fine and I'm more than ready for tomorrow. The Henderson account is too important to delay." "The account will still be there next week," Diane said. "You're more important." The simple statement of support brought unexpected tears to Jessica's eyes. She blinked them away quickly, grateful that Hector was focused on driving and not on his passenger's sudden emotion. "Thank you, but really, I'm okay. The airline has been extremely responsive. I'm actually in a car they arranged heading to the hotel now." After assuring Diane once more that she was fine and fully prepared for tomorrow, Jessica ended the call just as the car pulled up to her hotel. It was a sleek, modern building in the heart of downtown Chicago, chosen for its proximity to the Henderson Corporation headquarters. "Here we are, Ms. Morgan," Hector said, coming around to open her door. "I'll help you with your luggage." The hotel check-in process was smooth, and soon Jessica was in her room on the 19th floor with a spectacular view of the city. She unpacked methodically, hanging up her presentation outfit for tomorrow to let any wrinkles fall out. Her laptop went on the desk, her toiletries in the bathroom, her pajamas on the bed. The familiar routine was comforting. Once everything was in its place, Jessica sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to fully process the day's events. She had experienced discrimination before, of course. Subtle slights, uncomfortable assumptions, and occasional outright hostility. But never had she seen such immediate consequences for those responsible. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Robert Chen with the subject line "Follow-up and Next Steps." The message was brief but substantive. "Ms. Morgan, I wanted to provide you with an update. After further investigation, including review of additional passenger testimony and complete cabin footage, we have confirmed that the behavior you experienced violated multiple company policies. Formal termination proceedings for the 3 crew members have been initiated and will be completed by tomorrow morning. Additionally, I've spoken with our training director, who is very interested in your suggestion about developing this incident into a training module. If you're willing, she would like to speak with you when you return from your business trip. Please don't hesitate to contact me if you need anything else during your stay in Chicago or for your return journey. Regards, Robert Chen, VP of Customer Experience. Jessica read the email twice. It wasn't just empty corporate speak. They were actually taking concrete action. She sent a brief reply thanking him for the update and confirming her interest in contributing to the training program. After ordering room service, she didn't feel like going out tonight. Jessica opened her laptop and began reviewing her presentation for tomorrow. The Henderson campaign had been months in the making, a complete rebranding strategy for a family-owned furniture business that was expanding nationally. Her concept centered around honoring their traditional craftsmanship while appealing to younger, design-conscious consumers. As she flipped through her slides, Jessica found herself unexpectedly connecting her work to the day's events. Both were about recognition and respect, acknowledging people's value and treating them accordingly. Perhaps that's why the incident on the plane had hit her so hard. It had violated one of her core values. Her room service arrived, a perfectly cooked steak with roasted vegetables and a glass of red wine. As she ate by the window watching the city lights come alive as dusk fell, Jessica's phone rang again. This time it was her mother. "Just checking in on my girl," her mother said warmly. "How's Chicago?" Jessica hesitated, unsure whether to tell her about what had happened. Her mother had always been her rock, but she was also protective. The full story would only worry her. "The city's beautiful, Mom. My hotel room has an amazing view." "And the flight? I know how you hate turbulence." "The flight was smooth," Jessica said, which was technically true. "How's Dad's garden coming along?" Her mother launched into a detailed update about her father's ongoing battle with the neighborhood rabbits who seemed determined to feast on his prized vegetables. Jessica listened, smiling at the familiar family story, grateful for this touch of normalcy after such an unusual day. After they hung up, Jessica returned to her presentation, making a few final tweaks. Once satisfied, she closed her laptop and stepped to the window, looking out at the glittering cityscape. Tomorrow, she would walk into the Henderson Corporation's boardroom with confidence. She would present her ideas with the same dignity and self-assurance she had shown today on that flight. And she would land this account, not just for herself or her firm, but as another small reminder that she belonged in every room she entered, first-class cabins included. As she prepared for bed, Jessica reflected that while the day hadn't gone as planned, perhaps it had gone as it needed to. Sometimes the most important journeys weren't about reaching a destination, but about standing your ground along the way. The morning sunlight streamed through the half-open curtains of Jessica's hotel room, creating patterns on the carpet as she finished getting ready for her presentation. She stood before the mirror, adjusting the collar of her navy blue blazer and checking her appearance one final time. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, professional style, and she wore the pearl earrings her grandmother had given her when she graduated college, her lucky charm for important meetings. "You've got this," she whispered to her reflection, a personal ritual before any major presentation. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Robert Chen. "Good morning, Ms. Morgan. Just confirming that your return flight has been upgraded as promised. Also wanted to inform you that as of 8 a.m. this morning, all 3 flight attendants from yesterday's incident have been officially terminated. Wishing you success with your meeting today." Jessica read the message twice. The airline had moved with remarkable speed, less than 24 hours from incident to termination. Part of her felt a twinge of discomfort at knowing 3 people had lost their jobs because of what happened. But then she reminded herself that they had lost their jobs because of their own actions, not because she had spoken up about them. After gathering her presentation materials and tucking them into her leather portfolio, Jessica headed downstairs. The hotel restaurant was busy with the morning rush of business travelers, but she managed to find a small table by the window. As she sipped her coffee and picked at a bowl of fresh fruit, she mentally rehearsed her key talking points for the meeting. Her phone rang, Diane checking in. "Morning. How are you feeling today?" her boss asked. "Ready," Jessica replied confidently. I did one final review of everything last night. The presentation is solid. I know it is. That's why I sent you instead of going myself, Diane said. By the way, I had another call from that airline VP yesterday evening. They're taking this thing very seriously. Yes, I just got a text. Apparently, they've already fired the flight attendants involved. There was a pause on the line. Good, Diane said finally. Companies need to back up their diversity statements with actual action when incidents occur. After a few more minutes, discussing logistics for the Henderson meeting, Jessica ended the call and gathered her things. The hotel had arranged a taxi, which was already waiting outside. The ride to Henderson Corporation headquarters took just 15 minutes. The building was an impressive glass and steel structure downtown, reflecting the morning sky in its windows. Jessica took a deep breath as she walked through the revolving doors into the sleek lobby, pushing yesterday's events to the back of her mind. Right now, her focus needed to be entirely on this presentation. Good morning, she said to the receptionist. Jessica Morgan for the 9:30 meeting with Thomas Henderson. Yes, Ms. Morgan. They're expecting you in the main conference room, 18th floor. Someone will meet you at the elevator. The next 2 hours went by in a focused blur. Jessica presented her rebranding strategy to a room of 12 Henderson executives, including the company's founder, an imposing man in his 60s, who listened intently without revealing much through his expressions. She walked them through market research, consumer, insights, design concepts, and implementation strategies. Her voice never wavered. Her responses to questions were confident and comprehensive, and by the time she concluded, she could feel the energy in the room had shifted from skeptical to excited. Thomas Henderson himself stood up at the end. Ms. Morgan, I've sat through dozens of these presentations from agencies trying to tell me how to run the business my grandfather started. Most of them want to erase our heritage entirely, or keep us so traditional we'd never grow. Your approach is the first I've seen that truly understands what we're about. You've given us a lot to think about. We'll be in touch very soon. Coming from the notoriously hard-to-impress founder, this was high praise indeed. Jessica thanked him and began packing up her materials as the executives filed out, already discussing her ideas amongst themselves. One of the younger executives, a woman named Lisa who had been particularly engaged throughout the presentation, lingered behind. That was impressive, Lisa said, helping Jessica collect her handouts. Between you and me, I think you got this. The old man doesn't compliment presentations unless he's already made up his mind. I appreciate the inside info, Jessica smiled, feeling the post-presentation adrenaline still coursing through her. Also, Lisa continued, lowering her voice slightly, I couldn't help noticing your example of inclusive marketing materials. That's something we've been pushing for internally, but it's been a slow process. Having an outside expert recommend, it will help move things forward. Jessica nodded, recognizing a potential ally. Diverse representation isn't just socially responsible, it's good business. Your customer base is changing. Your marketing should reflect that. Exactly, Lisa agreed. Anyway, can I walk you out? I'm heading down to grab lunch. As they rode the elevator down, Lisa chatted about the company culture and her 5 years with Henderson. In the lobby, they exchanged business cards before parting ways. Back outside in the warm Chicago afternoon, Jessica checked her phone and found 3 missed calls from Diane and a text that simply read, "Call me ASAP." Concerned, she immediately dialed her boss. "Finally," Diane exclaimed when she answered. "How did it go?" "I think it went really well," Jessica began. Thomas Henderson actually complimented the presentation, which apparently is rare. "They're already on board," Diane interrupted excitedly. "Thomas called our CEO directly 10 minutes after your presentation ended. They want to sign with us immediately." "Jessica, you did it. The Henderson account is ours." The news took a moment to sink in. Major clients typically deliberated for days or even weeks before making decisions of this magnitude. Wow. That's amazing, Jessica managed, sitting down on a nearby bench as the reality hit her. Amazing doesn't cover it. This is the biggest account we've landed in 3 years. The team is already celebrating, and there's more. They specifically requested that you lead the account team. Thomas Henderson apparently said, and I'm quoting here, "We want to work with someone who stands by their convictions and knows their worth." A strange feeling washed over Jessica. Did you tell them about what happened on the flight? No, of course not. Why would I? Diane sounded confused. It's just an odd choice of words, Jessica mused. Well, whatever impressed him, you've just become our star player. The partners are discussing your promotion to senior director as we speak. The conversation continued for several minutes as they discussed next steps and immediate priorities for the new account. By the time they hung up, Jessica's head was spinning with the sudden turn of events. Not only had she landed the account, but she was looking at a significant promotion, something she had expected might be a year or more away. As the initial shock faded, hunger set in. Jessica realized she hadn't eaten since her light breakfast. She found a small cafe nearby and ordered a sandwich, sitting at an outdoor table to enjoy the pleasant weather. While waiting for her food, she received another email from Robert Chen. This one was longer than his previous communications. Ms. Morgan, I wanted to provide you with a more complete update following yesterday's incident. As previously mentioned, all 3 crew members have been terminated for violations of our anti-discrimination policies. Additionally, we've reviewed their service histories and found several previous complaints that, in retrospect, appear to follow a pattern that should have been identified sooner. This has prompted a broader review of how we track and respond to customer complaints. I've spoken with our training director, Amara Johnson, who is very excited about developing a comprehensive case study based on your experience. She's developed a preliminary outline for a training module that would be mandatory for all customer-facing staff. If you're amenable, she would like to arrange a video call with you next week to discuss your perspective and suggestions. On a personal note, I want to thank you for how you handled this situation. Your composure and professionalism throughout, combined with your willingness to speak up rather than simply accepting unacceptable treatment, has already sparked important conversations within our organization. Real change often begins with individuals who refuse to accept the status quo. Your return flight details have been confirmed as discussed. A representative will meet you at the check-in counter to personally ensure your experience is positive. Respectfully, Robert Chen. Jessica reread the email, focusing on the phrase, "Real change often begins with individuals who refuse to accept the status quo." It echoed Thomas Henderson's comment about standing by convictions. Her food arrived, and as she ate, she contemplated the unexpected connections between yesterday's flight incident and today's business success. Had word somehow reached Henderson? Chicago's business community was smaller than it appeared, and news traveled fast. Or perhaps it was simply that the same qualities that had prompted her to speak up on the plane, self-respect, conviction, professionalism under pressure, had also shown through in her presentation. After lunch, with several hours before her return flight, Jessica decided to take a short walk along the Chicago Riverwalk. The sun was bright, the air was crisp, and boats cruised lazily along the water. She found a quiet spot to sit, watching the city bustle around her. 2 days ago, she had been in her office excited about flying first class as a small reward for her hard work. Now, she was returning with a major account secured, a likely promotion on the horizon, and an unexpected role as a catalyst for corporate policy change at a major airline. Life could change direction in the most surprising ways. Sometimes the most significant journeys weren't the ones that took you from one city to another, but the ones that moved you from accepting things as they are to insisting on how they should be. As Jessica watched the sunlight play across the water, she felt a quiet sense of pride, not just in her professional accomplishment, but in having stood firm in her own worth. In first class, in boardrooms, and everywhere else, she had earned her seat at the table, and she wasn't about to let anyone suggest otherwise.